Prepare to be unnerved as we dive into three spine-chilling tales of stalkers lurking in the shadows, where isolation and fear intertwine to create a haunting experience you won't soon forget. Watch until the end for a twist that will leave you questioning what's lurking just beyond your sight. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon to never miss a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Story 1. The Watcher in the Shadows. I first noticed the feeling 3 weeks ago. It began as a subtle tickle at the back of my neck, like an errant breeze in a closed room. At first I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, who wouldn't feel a little uneasy living alone in a creaky old house? But the feeling didn't go away. Instead, it grew stronger, more insistent. It followed me, clinging to me like a shadow that refused to stay behind. I told myself I was being silly, that I was overworked and tired. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Something was watching me. The first real sign came on a Tuesday evening. I was sitting in my living room, reading a book, when I felt the unmistakable sensation of eyes on me. My skin prickled, and I glanced up from my book, my heart pounding. There was nothing there, just the darkened corners of the room and the soft hum of the refrigerator. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease. But then I noticed something strange. The curtains, which I always kept drawn, were slightly open, just a crack. I froze, staring at that small sliver of darkness beyond the glass. Had I left them like that? I couldn't remember. I got up, my legs feeling like jelly, and walked over to the window. My fingers trembled as I pulled the curtains shut. As I did, I caught a glimpse of something outside, a fleeting shadow moving away from the house. I gasped, my breath fogging up the glass, but when I looked again, there was nothing. The next few days passed in a haze of anxiety. Every time I left the house, I felt like I was being followed. Every time I returned, I expected to find someone waiting for me. I began double-checking the locks on my doors and windows, but it did little to ease my mind. Then came the night of the storm. The wind howled around the house, and rain lashed against the windows. I sat in my bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. That's when I heard a faint tapping sound coming from downstairs. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just a branch against the window. But the tapping grew louder, more insistent. I had to know what it was. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight to guide me as I crept down the stairs. The living room was dark, the only light coming from occasional flashes of lightning. The tapping continued, now coming from the kitchen. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move forward. As I stepped into the kitchen, the light from my phone fell on the back door. It was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind. I stopped breathing. I knew I had locked that door. Panic surged through me as I scanned the room, my flashlight catching glimpses of the familiar but now sinister shapes of my kitchen. Then I saw a muddy footprint on the floor, leading deeper into the house. My heart thundered in my chest. I turned to run back upstairs, but before I could move, the door behind me slammed shut. I screamed, dropping my phone, the light spinning wildly. In the brief moments of darkness, I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming towards me. I grabbed my phone, the light flickering as I stumbled back. The footsteps stopped. I swung the light around, searching for the source, but there was nothing, just silence and the relentless pounding of my heart. Then, a voice whispered from the shadows, "I've been watching you." I backed into the wall, the phone slipping from my grasp again. The light went out, plunging me into darkness. I fumbled for the switch, but a cold hand closed around my wrist, pulling me back. I screamed again, struggling against the iron grip. The hand released me suddenly, and I fell to the floor. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. I had to get out, had to escape. I ran for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked from the outside. Terror gripped me as I turned, pressing my back against the door. The darkness seemed to move, shifting and swirling around me. Then, in a flash of lightning, I saw him, a tall figure standing in the middle of the room, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent light. "Who are you?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled, a slow, chilling curve of his lips. "I'm your watcher," he said. "I've always been here, and now you'll never be alone again." As the storm raged outside, the last thing I saw was his shadow looming over me, his eyes never leaving mine, and then the darkness swallowed me whole. Story 2. Echoes in the Night. I used to love the solitude of living in the countryside. The isolation, the peace, the quiet, it all felt like a perfect escape from the chaos of city life. But now, solitude feels like a curse. It started with the phone calls. At first, they were infrequent, just once or twice a week. A call would come in late at night, and when I answered, there would be nothing but silence on the other end. I'd hang up, chalking it up to a wrong number or a prank call. But the calls kept coming, and they became more frequent. Every night, sometimes multiple times, the phone would ring, and I'd be met with that same eerie silence. The unease began to creep into my daily life. I started to jump at every little noise, every creak of the old house. I told myself it was just the wind, just the house settling. But deep down, I knew it was something more. One night, after yet another silent call, I decided to unplug the phone. I felt a sense of relief, thinking that would be the end of it. But the next night, the calls started coming on my cell phone. Always from a blocked number, always silent. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was a constant, nagging presence at the back of my mind. I started keeping the curtains drawn, locking the doors even when I was inside. But it didn't help. The feeling only grew stronger. One evening, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields. I walked down the familiar path, listening to the crunch of gravel under my feet, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. For a moment, I felt at peace, but then I heard a faint rustling behind me. I turned, expecting to see a deer or a stray dog, but there was nothing there. I told myself it was just the wind, just the trees, but as I continued walking, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. The rustling grew louder, more persistent. I broke into a run, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I was back inside the house, the door slammed shut behind me. I pressed my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. My eyes scanned the room, every shadow, every corner. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every groan of the house made my heart race. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence, and then I heard a soft, almost imperceptible tapping sound. I sat up, my heart pounding. The tapping continued, coming from somewhere downstairs. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept down the stairs, my hands shaking. The tapping led me to the living room. I flipped the light switch, but the room remained dark. The bulb had burned out. I cursed under my breath, fumbling for the flashlight on the coffee table. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the room. And then I saw a figure standing by the window, a man, his face hidden in the shadows. I froze, the bat slipping from my grasp. The man didn't move, didn't say a word. He just stood there staring at me. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what was happening. And then in a flash, he was gone. The room was empty, the window closed and locked. I backed into the wall, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Had I imagined it? Was my mind playing tricks on me? I didn't know what to believe. The next day, I went to the police. They listened to my story, but there was little they could do. No evidence, no witnesses. I was on my own. Days turned into weeks, and the feeling of being watched never went away. Every time I stepped outside, I felt eyes on me. Every time I went to sleep, I feared waking up to find that figure standing over me. And then, one night, it happened. I woke up to the sound of breathing. I opened my eyes, and there he was, standing at the foot of my bed, his face hidden in the shadows. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching me. And then, slowly, he reached out a hand. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen with fear. His hand touched my face, cold and clammy, and I shuddered. "You're mine now," he whispered, his voice a low, guttural growl. I tried to move, to scream, but I couldn't. My body was paralyzed, my mind filled with terror. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a small, dark room. The walls were bare, the air musty. I tried to stand, but my legs were weak, my body aching. I stumbled to the door, but it was locked. I was trapped. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, weeks, months, it all blurs together. The only thing I know is that I'm not alone. He's always there, watching, waiting. And I know, deep down, that I'll never escape. I'm his prisoner, his plaything. And the worst part, I don't even know why. Story 3. The Unseen Presence. The first time I noticed him was on a brisk October evening, just as the leaves began to blanket the ground in hues of red and gold. I was walking home from work, the crisp air biting at my cheeks, when I felt an inexplicable prickle on the back of my neck. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a figure standing under a distant street lamp. He was too far away to make out any details, just a silhouette against the dying light. I quickened my pace, the echo of my footsteps suddenly feeling too loud in the empty street. I told myself it was nothing, just another person heading home, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. By the time I reached my apartment, I was practically running. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, leaning against the wood as if it could protect me from the gnawing sense of dread. The days that followed were uneventful, and I almost convinced myself that I had overreacted. But the feeling of being watched never entirely left me. It lingered in the back of my mind, growing stronger each evening as I walked the same route home. I started taking different paths, hoping to shake off the feeling, but it always found me, an invisible weight pressing down on my shoulders. One night, as I was leaving the office, I noticed him again. This time he was closer, standing just outside the building, partially hidden in the shadows. My breath hitched, and I quickly ducked into a nearby coffee shop, my hands trembling as I ordered a drink. I sat by the window, peering out from behind the curtains, but he was gone. I began to dread the walk home. I started taking cabs, but even that didn't help. The driver would drop me off, and as soon as I stepped out of the car, the feeling returned, more intense than before. My apartment, once a sanctuary, became a prison. I kept the curtains drawn, the doors locked, but it didn't stop the sensation that he was out there, watching, waiting. Then came the night of the storm. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning split the sky as I hurried home, clutching my umbrella against the torrential rain. The streets were deserted, the only sound the relentless patter of rain and the occasional boom of thunder. I was halfway home when I saw him again, standing at the edge of the park, just barely visible through the sheets of rain. Panic surged through me. I broke into a run, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, louder than the storm. I didn't stop until I was inside my apartment, the door locked and bolted behind me. I pressed my back against the door, struggling to catch my breath. The storm raged outside, but inside, it was deathly silent. I made my way to the kitchen, needing a drink to steady my nerves. As I reached for a glass, I heard a soft tapping sound coming from the living room. I froze, the glass slipping from my hand and shattering on the floor. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate, echoing through the silent apartment. I grabbed a knife from the counter, my hands shaking. I crept towards the living room, every muscle in my body tensed. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I rounded the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. The window was open, rain pouring in and soaking the carpet. The tapping was coming from the window frame, a small branch knocking against the glass. I let out a shaky breath, feeling foolish. I closed the window, locking it tight. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. There, on the wet carpet, were muddy footprints leading away from the window and disappearing into the hallway. My heart pounded in my chest. I followed the footprints, the knife clutched tightly in my hand. They led to my bedroom. I pushed the door open, my breath catching in my throat. The room was dark, the only light coming from the street lamp outside, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning the room. The closet door was ajar and I could see the outline of something or someone inside. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move forward. I reached out with a trembling hand and yanked the door open. The closet was empty. My mind reeled. I backed away, my thoughts a chaotic whirl. And then I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The room was empty. I stumbled back, dropping the knife. As I did, I noticed something on the floor, a small, worn photograph. I picked it up with shaking hands and gasped. It was a picture of me, taken from outside my window. I looked up, my blood running cold. Written on the wall, in a jagged, hurried scrawl, were the words I always hear. I fled the apartment that night, never to return. But the feeling of being watched, the sense of an unseen presence, has never left me. Even now, as I sit in a different city, in a different apartment, I can't shake the feeling that he is still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. We hope these chilling stories have left you with a lingering sense of unease and a newfound awareness of the shadows around you. If you enjoyed the fright, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales that will keep you up at night.